Hey everybody, this is your Right Geek, honorary man king, and leader of the Awkward Cough Squad, here to discuss a couple of comics that I've been reading over the past week. Uh, First of all, as you can see, yes, I am in the process of reading a couple of things, including One Punch Man. I know, Punchy, you out there want to see me take a look at this one. I only just started this, so I'll probably be talking about this more in next week's video, but I just wanted to let you know that it's in my in-progress list, and it's going to be read, and I will have some things to say about it once I have finished this first volume. I'm also reading, as you can see, this Action Philosophers book, which is pretty cute. And of course, Cells at Work Baby, because I love the Cells at Work franchise just in general. I think it's a really cute way to teach the audience basically medical science. So these are a couple of things I'm interested in that I'm in the process of reading right now. But to get to the main topic of this video, I'm going to talk about some things that I had a chance to take a look at this week. We have, first of all, this one, which is Action Presidents, George Washington. This is basically a little historical graphic novel by Fred Van Lent and Ryan Dunleavy. It's targeted at kids and therefore has, the kind of jokes that kids would like fart jokes and stuff like that. But the history, he actually makes an effort to include the real history. The art, I think, in this is quite engaging, as well as the writing. And what I appreciate about this particular book is that the writer takes care to be honest about the history and to expose kids to the real history of George Washington. But so what that means is that he is honest about the fact that George Washington owned slaves and that he had some opinions about different races that perhaps do not fit they definitely did not fit what 2020 would consider to be proper opinions in terms of race. So he's very honest about that. He's very sincere about that. But at the same time, he also shows through his storytelling the reasons why we consider George Washington to be a great man, despite his flaws, and despite the fact that in many ways he reflected the kind of more unfortunate aspects of his time period. So let's see here. Let's browse the pages here. Towards the end, there's actually a really great panel that I want to read off that kind of encapsulates the intent of this book in general, and why I think if you want to introduce your kids in particular to real, honest, sincere American history that also is essentially patriotic, this is a good series to try. So let's see if I can find the panel I'm talking about here. Oh yes, here we go. So let me zoom in on this. So the narrator of this book says, and the narrator's like this funny turkey character here, which is pretty cute. So he says, he wasn't some mythological demigod. He did good things and he did bad things. He was a person like you and me. And that's what makes all he accomplished all the more amazing. And that's why we have statues to him. The reason why we honor George Washington in our statuary is not because he was a slave owner. That was immaterial to the reason why we honor him. We honor him because of the good things he did. I think that this is a good sentiment here, this idea that, he was a human being, so he had flaws. Of course he had flaws, and he had opinions that don't really match the opinions of today, because he lived in the past, and the past, as many people say, is basically a foreign country. But that doesn't mean that we should, because he was imperfect, we should neglect the great things he actually did. So this basically expresses the philosophy of this book in general, and that's why, again, I think this would be a good selection to give to your kids to get them interested in true, honest, but also patriotic American history. So the truth is always better. That's what she's saying. The truth actually makes these men, the writer's basically saying the truth actually makes our founders seem more amazing. Because if you recognize their humanity, the remarkable thing they accomplished in establishing our constitutional order becomes all that more extraordinary. So that is Action Presidents George Washington. That one I would give my highest recommendation, especially if you have kids that you're trying to get interested in. If you have kids that you're trying to get interested in American history, that is not false and woke, that would be a good book series to try. Then, of course, this past week we also had another issue of Empyre hitting the stores here. And Empyre, I would give kind of a soft recommendation. I don't think it's terrible. I think that actually there are some aspects of this sort of event so far that are actually quite good. I think the art actually continues to be extremely good. I love the colors here and the designs. This is actually quite good to look at. As I said in my previous Empyre video, this book, if it's good for anything at all, it's certainly good for eye candy. But actually, the story is not too bad either. Of course, I would have to see how this is going to evolve. I'm not sure I necessarily trust Al Ewing and Dan Slott to pull off the potential that seems to be in this plot line. But, at this point, I'm still willing to give it a shot and see where this goes, especially because we get this little moment right here with between Tony and Reed Richards, in which we get the thing that I was kind of hoping for last week on Twitter when I said that Empyre 2 was boring and it didn't really address the fact that that Tony was the one who convinced the Avengers to fight on the side of the Katati, and therefore was kind of the inciting character that mixed them up in the Katati's plan for revenge. And I was disappointed in Empyre 2 that they didn't address that, and they didn't address Tony's likely reaction to that, which would be, oh shit, I made another terrible mistake. But fortunately, in this issue, they do address that. So we have this scene right here in which Tony, you can see that he's apparently not slept in a while because his eyes are all swollen. That's some interesting expressive art right there. He's not shaving. I'm going to guess that he's not showering either. And basically he's sitting there, brooding and calling himself stupid for actually getting sucked into the Katati's mind games, essentially. Because the Katati actually specifically targeted him for their propaganda, and he got sucked into it. So his reaction, predictably, is quite emotional and quite angry. He basically yells at himself, "You never think, you never think." So this is a pretty good scene where Reed's trying to calm him down, and I believe them, Reed, all of it. Every blasted word the Katati told me, I lapped it all up and asked for seconds. So for me, for someone who is a huge Tony Stark fan, this scene right here gave me almost everything I needed. The only thing that would make this even better, as I said on Twitter, is if in a later issue, this kind of emotional state that Tony is in leads him to do something ridiculously self-sacrificial for the sake of Earth. If that happens, then my estimation of this entire plot line will shoot up enormously, and it might become one of my most favorite plot lines of the past couple of years. So we have, so again, it opens up with this scene with Tony, which again, I really adore, as you can tell. And then it moves on to other areas of the plot, which, again, this plot overall is not that bad. I don't think Marvel really sold it well when they were kind of in the run-up to selling this event. So there hasn't been a lot of enthusiasm for it. I haven't noticed a lot of people talking about it on social media or anything, but I think that this does have potential, particularly if the art continues to stay at this quality. See, that's pretty dope right there. We also have in this book the interesting conflict that comes up. Let me see if I can find the Hulklings pages here. Because the Hulkling side of the plot basically he's being pressured into destroying the Earth in order to stop the Katati menace in its tracks. And of course, the Hulkling, because he has connections to Earth, is not going to want to do that. So it's also going to be interesting to see exactly where that side of the plot goes, in terms of is he going to succumb to the pressure to take the Skrulls and the Kree's extreme measures in order to stop the Katati, or is he going to be able to find a kind of third way out of the situation? Yeah, so there's definitely some potential in this story. I don't think it has come to fruition yet, which is why I would give it a soft recommend. But again, if you like fairly good art and some drama with characters, especially Tony Stark and the Hulkling, this might be something that you would enjoy reading. So that's Empyre. And then the third thing I want to talk about tonight is going to be Iron Man 2020, the bane of my existence. The thing that should have been over early this spring if it weren't for the darn COVID throwing everything into disarray. So we're still kind of trapped in the storyline. Those of us who are Iron Man fans and are interested in buying Iron Man books to see what's done with the character. As you know from a lot of the previous videos I've done on this particular series, I'm not fond of it at all. I don't like how Dan Slott is writing the character, and I don't like Arno Stark because, as I've said in the past, the only reason why Arno Stark exists is because of that stupid ass Secret Origin of Tony Stark storyline. that I would rather just expunge from 616 canon completely. Punchy called it the Tony Targaryen plot, and yeah, I mean that's basically what it is. I'm probably going to refer to it as that from now on. But that was absolute trash, and maybe one day I'll talk about all the ways in which that was trash. But the fact that we're proceeding as if that is canon, that really grinds my gears. And then Arno Stark himself is just not that interesting of a character. I'm not invested in him at all. I read Iron Man books for the purpose of reading about Tony Stark. The reason I became an Iron Man fan is because of Tony Stark. Who are all these other people that have kind of invaded the whole plot line? I mean, for this book, the art hasn't been that bad, I don't think. But the story is just really, it hasn't, at best, when it hits its highest points, it is at best mediocre. And it doesn't really hit any of the required emotional buttons that I need for it to be a really good Iron Man story. As I said in an earlier video, I think part of the intended drama of the story is the whole idea of brother fighting against brother. Now, you can make a really good story out of that, of that basic concept. But the problem is that Arno and Tony did not grow up together. So there is none of that actual genuine brotherly feeling between them. They just happen to be connected via the same Stark name, but there's no actual emotional resonance to their conflict. The other problem I have with this plot line, just in general, as I talked about in the last Iron Man 2020 video I did, is the fact that it doesn't stick the landing on the matter of Tony's identity crisis. The fact that he has been wondering if he is in fact still Tony Stark, if he still has Tony Stark's soul. And in the last issue, basically in a couple of pages, they said, yeah, he is. The end. That's the end of the plot. And I talked about all the ways that that's just not satisfying at all. If you're going to have a character have an identity crisis, if you're going to have a character question whether he still has a soul and whether he really is the person he thinks he is, I think that really needs to be a lengthier and deeper plot line in which he gradually comes to learn exactly what it means to be Tony Stark, and exactly what it means to have Tony Stark's heroic personality. And there are some things in here, like, see, this looks pretty dope, but the story is just like, I'm not into it. First of all, there's just way too many characters, and that's not to say that Iron Man comics in the past have not had side characters. Of course they have, but the size of the cast in this particular story is so unbelievably large, and most of the characters just really aren't that distinctive or interesting. So it doesn't. It feels overburdened and overpopulated. And it kind of it makes the reader feel distant from what's going on. It's not like in the old comics that I've been in the comics from the 1960s that I've been reading to grab screen caps for my Iron Man blog. You had side characters like Madame Mask and Jasper Sitwell and things like that. So there were side characters, they did exist, but back then, when they would introduce a side character who would have a major role in the plot, they actually spent some time giving those characters personalities. So you have Jasper Sitwell, for example, is like the most Boy Scoutish Boy Scout to ever Boy Scout. He's, super idealistic and is determined to serve S.H.I.E.L.D. with 100% gusto and enthusiasm. And because he has that sort of Boy Scoutish personality, the way that he interacts with Tony is interesting, because Tony is rather less of a Boy Scout, although he has he's still a good guy, but his reaction to Jasper's extreme eagerness and earnestness is very, very funny. And then, Madame Mask's storyline is, of course, very interesting, because, her origin is basically that she's her face is disfigured, and so she feels that she can't be loved by anyone, and so she becomes a villain. So, like, these earlier side characters, they had, backstories and personalities that were distinct, and it's not quite so true with the characters that we see in this particular plot line. So, when I read this, it just kind of glides over my mind. It makes me think, who are these people? Why should I care? Which is very bad, because as an Iron Man fan, I should care deeply about a book that has Iron Man in the title. And then we have this. This is the part that Comic Perch kind of highlighted as being extraordinarily cringy. All of a sudden, Sunset Bane, develops this ridiculously dramatic eyeshadow and kills her other self, or kills her real self. And she's like, "What? 2 extra?" Oh my gosh, that's terrible. And then we have the cat, the talking cat, of course, who hits the master controls because the cat is the mole inside Banetronics. And then all this time it was you're the mole. It wasn't a trick. You really are a genius. Well, say something. And the cat says, meow, which is just, I agree with Comic Birch. This is very, very cringy. And I say that as someone who likes cats, but talking cats and Iron Man do not mix in any way. And then we have more battles that look fairly visually appealing, but again, there's just no emotional connection that I can make with any of the characters that are involved here. Oh, and then we have here Jocasta fighting the AI version of Sunset Bane here. And Jocasta basically decides to download the obedience AI into Sunset Bane so that she can control what Sunset Bane does. And when I read this, I thought, wow, hypocrite much? I mean, the entire point of the robot revolution is that they did not want to be controlled. And now you're turning around and controlling this particular AI because she worked on the wrong side. That shows an astonishing lack of principle on the part of the supposed good guys. But then again, that goes back to what I've been saying in the previous videos, that the supposed good guys of the AI revolution are in fact doing things that are by definition terroristic, and they're not using tactics to they're not using tactics that protect innocents, and in many cases they are displaying some pretty obvious anti-human bigotry. So basically, it seems like they're out for revenge rather than for the principle of since we're sapient, we just want to be free. And this is a good scene of what I've been talking about. The fact that these robots in the revolution are not, in fact, behaving in ways that are, by definition, heroic. And, by the end, Tony shows up. He's got this new kind of holographic armor that can be essentially whatever he wants it to be. And he gets into the conflict that I'm sure you are all expecting with Arno Stark. Yep, there we go. We see them fighting. He's got the kind of Iron Man 2020 armor. Tony has the holographic armor. Then he can make whatever he wants. And by the end, the so-called singularity that Arno Stark has been planning for eventually shows up. And that's basically going to lead us into the so-called stunning conclusion of this really, really mediocre story that at this point I don't think anyone really cares about anymore. I think I might be, in fact, the only person in the world that's still reading this. Well, except for Perch. Perch read it. Perch and I, we're the completists. We're sticking through to the end just to see what happens. But I'm pretty sure everyone else has dropped out by now. At least everyone else who talks about comics on YouTube. But yeah, so this is not a recommend, as you may have noticed by the things I've been talking about. I will actually be very happy when this is over. And then we get on to the next run that's supposed to start in September, I think. They're promising that it's going to be a quote-unquote back to basics run. There are some things in the advertising copy that concern me, as I mentioned in another video I did a while back. But if they actually do go back to the true basics of Tony Stark, I will be very happy. As I've said online, I really haven't seen a good Iron Man run since the early 2000s, to be honest. I would really like to see a good Iron Man run again, as someone who really, really loves Tony Stark and Iron Man as a character. So yeah, anyway, so that's not a recommend. So just to review the books that I talked about today, we had Action Presidents George Washington. That is definitely a recommend, especially for kids. If you want to get them introduced to real American history, this might be a good way to do it. We have Empyre #3, which is a soft recommend. Once again, it seems to have a lot of potential. I'm willing to see where they take this. And then Iron Man 2020 is, of course, a not recommend. So those of you who are listening to this video, what are your thoughts? Please share them in the comment below, and I will speak to you again next week. Thank you for listening.